Hello fanatics. Yeah, I am here for part 2 of the White House murders. So I'm just going to begin by saying, if you haven't seen part 1, please go check that out, because that details the crime extensively. It is processing as we speak, so it'll be online by the time, well, they will, both will be. So I'm just going to carry on where I left off. So if you haven't seen part 1, please go check that out first, as we are talking about we're a lot further on than the murders themselves. So just to recap, Jeremy Bamber has been jailed. He's been told he's not coming out, and he was convicted of killing his whole family, his adoptive mum, adoptive dad, sister, not blood relative, but sister, and her 2 sons who were aged 6. So we've discussed in detail everything. I haven't left anything out on this article. So we are going to begin with the appeals. Yeah, it's time to read, so I can't paint as much as I want to. Okay, the appeals process. Bamber first sought to leave to appeal in November 1986, arguing that the judge had misdirected the jury. That's laughable. The application was heard and refused by Mr. Justice Caulfield in April 1988, during a full hearing in March 1989 before the 3 appeal court judges, Lord Lane, Lord Chief Justice, and Justice Roach, and Mr. Justice Henry. Bamber's lawyer, Geoffrey Rivlin, argued that the trial judges' summing up had been biased against Bamber, that his language had been too forceful, and that he had undermined the defence by advancing his own theory. Rivlin also argued that the defence had not pressed Julie Mugford about her dealings with the media, which should have, because as soon as the trial was over, her story began to appear in newspapers. The trial was over, so does it matter? Because it was over. Asking you guys. On the 20th of March 1989, the judges refused Bamber leave to appeal, ruling that there was nothing unsafe or unsatisfactory about the verdicts. Because the trial judge had criticised the police investigation, Essex Police held an internal inquiry. Bamber alleged this report confirmed that evidence had been withheld by the police, so he made a formal complaint, which was investigated in 1991 by the City of London Police. This investigation uncovered more material, which Bamber used to petition the Home Secretary in September 1993 for a referral back to the Court of Appeal, refused in 1994. During this process, the Home Office declined to give Bamber the expert evidence it had obtained, so Bamber applied for a judicial review of their decision in November 1994, which resulted in the Home Office handing over the evidence. In 1996, a police officer destroyed many of the trial exhibits, saying later he had not been aware that the case was ongoing. Bamber's defence team referred to the destruction of blood samples as a, quote, disgrace. It is odd. I don't know why they destroyed stuff. Is it a time-lapse thing, or because surely by now, if it is a miscarriage of justice, they need that proof, don't they? So now they haven't got it, even though they've said you're never coming out. If it was proved that he didn't do it, if, you know, I'm a firm believer that he did, they would need the evidence that they collected, surely. Okay, Court of Appeal 2002, Criminal Case Review Commission referral. In 1997, the Home Office passed Bamber's case to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, CCRC, which had been established to review alleged miscarriages of justice. In March 2001, the CCRC referred the case to the Court of Appeal because of the discovery of DNA inside the silencer. This was found as a result of a test not available in 1986 and constituted fresh evidence. Bamber's conviction rested in part on evidence that Sheila's blood had been found inside the silencer, suggesting that it had been on the gun when she died, but her arms were not long enough to point the gun back at herself and pull the trigger with the silencer attached. The appeal was heard from the 17th of October to the 1st of November 2002 at the Royal Courts of Justice by Lord Justice Kay, Mr. Justice Wright and Mr. Justice Henriquez, who established their decision on the 12th of December 2002. The prosecution was represented by Victor Temple and Bamber by Michael Turner. In a 5-2 point judgment, the judges concluded there was no conduct on the part of the investigators that threatened the integrity of the trial, and that the more they examined the case, the more they thought the jury had been right. Grounds. Bamber initially brought 16 issues to the attention of the court. 2 related to the silencer and DNA testing. The rest were about failure to disclose evidence or the fabrication of evidence. The defence withdrew Ground 11 before the hearing. Ground 1A, hand swabs from Sheila Caffel. 1B, the testing of the hand swabs from Sheila Caffel. 2, disturbance of the crime scene. 3, evidence relating to windows. 4, timing of phone call to Julie Mugford. 5, evidence relevant to the credibility of Julie Mugford. 6, letter from Colin Caffel. 7, the statement of Colin Caffel. 8, photograph showing the carving of the words "I hate this place." I wanted to bring that up earlier, but I will carry on. 9, the Bible. 10, the question of inheritance. 11, the proposed purchase of a Porsche by the appellant. 12, the telephone in the office. 13, scars on the appellant's hands. 14 and 15, blood in the sound moderator. 15, DNA evidence. 16, police misconduct. New silencer evidence. Although all the grounds except 11, which was the proposed purchase of a Porsche by the appellant were reviewed by the court. The CCRC referred the case to the Court of Appeal on the basis of ground 15, DNA evidence. The discovery of DNA on the silencer, the result of a test not available in 1986. The silencer evidence during the trial had come from John Hayward, a biologist in private practice, formerly of the Forensic Science Laboratory. He found a, quote, considerable amount of blood inside the silencer. He had stated that it was human blood and that the blood group was consistent with it having come from Sheila. He said that there was a, quote, remote possibility that it was a mixture of blood from Neville and June. Mark Webster, an expert instructed by Bamber's defence team, argued that Hayward's tests had been inadequate and that there was a real possibility, not a remote one, that the blood had come from Neville and June. This was a critical point because the prosecution case rested on the silencer having been on the gun when Sheila was shot, something she could not have done herself because of the length of her arms. If she was shot with the silencer on the gun, it meant someone else had shot her. If the blood was inside the silencer, it supported the prosecution's position that she had been shot by another party. But if the blood inside the silencer belonged to someone else, that part of the prosecution case collapsed. The defence argued that new tests comparing DNA in the silencer to a sample from Sheila's biological mother. I was going to say, how did they test it if they got rid of all the evidence? Well, of course, the biological mother. Okay, suggested that the, quote, major component of the DNA in the silencer had not come from Sheila. A DNA sample from June's sister suggested that the major component had come from June, the defence argued. The court concluded that June's DNA in the silencer, that Sheila's DNA may have been in the silencer, and that there was evidence of DNA from at least one male. Where were we? The judge's conclusion was that the results were complex, incomplete and also meaningless because they did not establish how June's DNA came to be in the silencer years after the trial. Did not establish that Sheila's was not in it and did not lead to a conclusion that Bamber's conviction was unsafe. Whole life tariff. In 2008, Bamber lost a High Court appeal before Mr. Justice, I would try to pronounce that, Tugendhat, against his whole life tariff. This was upheld by the Court of Appeal in 2009. Bamber and 3 other British whole life prisoners appealed to the European Court of Human Rights, but the appeal was rejected in 2012. Bamber and 2 of the prisoners, one of them was serial killer Peter Moore, have to Google him, appealed that decision, and in 2013 the European Court's Grand Chamber ruled that keeping the prisoners in jail with no prospect of release or review may not be compatible with Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which prohibits inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment. Now let's back up a minute. They're campaigning for human rights because they are not allowed to have the prospect of being released one day or what was the other thing? Review their case. I'm sorry, but where was the human rights for the 2 6-year-old boys, the 28-year-old Sheila, and Neville and June? It's inhumane. Okay. The campaign, they actually have this. They're campaigning on behalf of Jeremy Bamber. Now, you know where I stand, but I'm open. I am open to the fact that maybe he didn't do it, but it's going to take something significant to make me go, whoa. So, let's see about this campaign, shall we? I'm enjoying this canvas, by the way. Right, background. A campaign known from November 2015 as JB Campaign Limited gathered pace over the years to secure Bamber's release. The civil liberties group Justice for All took up his case in 1993 to prepare his appeal. I'm just going to shut this window because people are annoying. They're doing things outside. Sorry. Where was we? Took up his case in 93 to prepare for his appeal that year, and The Guardian ran a long investigative piece by Jim Shelley in November 93, which included a telephone interview with Bamber from Long Lartin prison. Bamber said he could still not understand why he had been convicted. Oh my days. From March 2000, I have nothing to say. In March 2001, several websites were set up to discuss the evidence, and in 2002, Bamber used one of the sites to offer a £1 million reward for evidence that would overturn his conviction. How is he going to pay that? Okay, campaign events included a supporter reading a letter from Bamber to his parents at their graveside, and that quote, Bamber Bake Off, featuring his mother's favourite recipes. Bamber's case was taken up by MPs George Galloway and Andrew Hunter and journalists Bob Woofenden and Eric Allison of The Guardian. Allison became one of the campaigners' patrons. Woofenden argued that between 2007 and 2011 that Sheila had shot her family, then watched as police gathered outside before shooting herself. He changed his mind in 2011 when he believed Bamber was guilty. In 2015, the human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell appealed to the Chief Constable of Essex Police to disclose all evidence relating to the case. Most of it is gone, but okay. Campaign's arguments. Location of Sheila's body, time of death. Okay, these are the arguments that go against part 1 of what we discussed. The defence disputed the location of Sheila's body. The police said they had found her upstairs with her mother. According to early police logs, one officer reported seeing through a window what he thought was the body of a woman near the kitchen door, but he later radioed that it was a man. A retired police officer who worked on the case said in 2011 that the first police logs were simply mistaken in reporting that a woman's body had been found downstairs. Bamber's lawyers argued that images of Sheila taken by a police photographer at around 9 a.m. on the 7th of August 1985 showed that her blood was still wet. According to the defence team, she had been killed before 3:30 a.m. As the prosecution said, the blood would have been congealed by 9 a.m. But they went in at 7:56, didn't they? I'm pretty sure they went in before 8 a.m. Anyway, that's by memory on part one. They argued that she was alive when Bamba was standing outside the house with the police, shot herself in the kitchen just as the police entered, then ran up. Really? She shot herself and then she's running around the house? Then ran up one of the staircases to the bedroom where she shot herself again, this time fatally. It seems ludicrous to me that she would think, okay, the game's up, I'm not getting out of this, I'm going to shoot myself downstairs, then I'm going to go upstairs and shoot myself again. My opinion, guys, as always. Alleged crime scene damage. The defence argued that the first officers to enter on the farmhouse... Oh, it's gone off again. Give me a second, guys. There's something wrong with this iPad. I just plugged it in, waited a couple of seconds, it came back on, it's on 71%. So I don't know what's wrong with this thing. Right, I didn't go back and find out where I was last. So I was... Alleged crime scene damage. I'll just begin from there. The defence argued that the first officers to enter the farmhouse had inadvertently disturbed the crime scene, then reconstructed it. Crime scene photographs, not made available to the original defence, show Sheila's right arm and hand in slightly different positions in relation to the gun, which is lying across her body. The gun itself also appears to have moved. Former Lancashire Detective Chief Superintendent Mick Gradwell, shown the photographs by The Guardian and Observer, said in 2011, the evidence shows or portrays Essex police having damaged the scene, then having staged it again to make it look like it was originally. And if this happened and that hasn't been disclosed, that is really, really serious. Yes, I'll give them that, it is. Arguments about the silencer. The contention that the gun had a silencer on it during the murders was central to the prosecution's case. Bamba and his lawyers have sought since 1987 to demolish the silencer evidence. With the silencer fitted, the gun was too long for Sheila to have turned it on herself. According to the prosecution, paint on the silencer could be matched to fresh scratch marks on the kitchen mantelpiece, assumed to have been made during a fight for the gun. That the silencer was found in the gun cupboard was important to the prosecution because Sheila had no reason to return it to the cupboard before killing herself. Well, because she was running around. No, don't do it. Okay. But that it was found by one of the cousins who inherited part of the estate days after the police had searched the house. Blighted by the prosecution's case, although it was accepted by a majority of the jury. Lee writes that the silencer evidence became confused because of the way the exhibit was named. It was first called SBJ-1 because it was handed over by DS Stan Jones, SBJ, when it was learned that David, the cousin, I think, found it. the silencer was renamed Exhibit DB1. But because there was a DC David Bird, it was renamed again to DRB1. The name changes led to confusion in later documents, giving the impression that more than one silencer had been found. In 2011, Lee writes, Bamber's blog announced, quote, "We can now prove 100% that there were 2 sound moderators obtained by the police at different times." The CCRC responded that year that the claims were, quote, "not supported by the material that exists." Again in 2013, Bamber's blog said, quote, "I can now prove with 100% certainty that Essex Police seized one Parker Hale MM1 type suppressor from the house on the 7th of August 1985, the day of the murder rather than the day the cousin found it. According to the Times in 2013, Bamber aimed to show that police had taken 4 silencers from his family members, including the one in the gun cupboard, and that evidence and paperwork from them, and from an additional laboratory silencer had been mixed up. Yeah, I'm a bit confused by all that. They're saying there's more than one, but it wasn't, it was just renamed. In or around 2012, Bamber's lawyers commissioned gun experts from the US and UK to examine photographs of the bodies and the silencer evidence. They argued that injuries on the bodies were consistent with the silencer not having been used, and that its absence would explain burn marks on Neville's body. The court had heard that, quote, 3 circular burn type marks had been found on Neville's back. In November 1985, a police report submitted to the Director of Public Prosecutions had argued that the burn marks were made with the hot end of a gun or with a poker from the cooker in the kitchen. Arguments about scratch marks. The defence commissioned a report from Peter Sutherest, a British forensic photography expert, who was asked in 2008 to examine negatives of the kitchen taken on the day of the murders and later. In his report dated the 17th of January 2010, Sutherest argued that the scratch marks in the red paintwork on the kitchen mantelpiece had been created after the crime scene photos had been taken. The prosecution alleged that the marks had been made during the struggle in the kitchen between Bamber and his father, as the silencer attached to the rifle had scratched against the mantelpiece. The prosecution said that paint chips identical to the paint on the mantelpiece had been found on or inside the silencer. Sutherest said the scratch marks appeared in photos taken on the 10th of September, 34 days after the murders, but were not visible in the original crime scene photos. Wow. He's looking at a crime scene and he's zooming in on the mantelpiece. I know that's his job, but I'm just picturing Neville sat there and then he's zooming in past Neville. Okay. He also said that he failed to find the photographs. He also said he had failed to find in the photographs any chipped paint on the carpet below the mantelpiece where it might have been expected to fall had the mantelpiece been scratched during a struggle. Okay. He was asked by the CCRC to examine a red spot on the carpet visible in photos underneath the scratches on the mantelpiece. He said the red spot matched a piece of nail varnish missing from one of Sheila's toes. He concluded that the scratch marks on the mantel had been created after the date of the murders. Arguments about police logs. Police telephone logs had been entered into evidence during the trial, but had not been noticed by Bamber's lawyers. Bamber's new defence team, based on their new CCRC submissions, in part on these logs, particularly on the radio log that they say shows Neville called the police that night to say his daughter had, quote, gone berserk with one of his guns. A separate log of a police radio message shows that there was an attempt to speak to someone inside the farmhouse that night, as police waited outside to enter, but there was no response. Police say the officers simply made a mistake. Now, okay, the phone is off the hook, so they're not going to get through. A separate log, they were trying to speak to someone inside the farmhouse, so they're all gone, sadly, but the phone was off the hook, if memory serves. Arguments about Mugford's letter. Bamber's lawyers argued that the 26th of September 1985 letter to Julie Mugford from John Walker, Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions, raised the possibility that Mugford had been persuaded to testify in the hope that the charges against her would not be pursued. In the letter, Walker had suggested to the Chief Constable of Essex Police, quote, with considerable hesitation, that Mugford not be prosecuted for drug offences, burglary and cheque fraud, to which she had confessed during her police interviews regarding Bamber. The defence team also highlighted that as soon as the verdict was announced, Mugford sold her story to the News of the World for £25,000, equivalent to £73,792 in 2019. Now, I'm very conflicted about Julie Mugford because they got her to the scene of the crime before they entered, and Jeremy said, "Oh, I should have been an actor." I'm assuming because he'd done it and he's acting like the grieving son and or concerned or whatever, offering Porsches out to everyone. And when she got dumped, she went to the police and said, he's been saying this, he's been saying that, which is probably true, but why, when you've been dumped, do you go? And again, I agree with don't charge her for cheque fraud, burglary, because they robbed the caravan park, didn't they? So yeah, I'm kind of with them on that. And she sold her story, but I don't know if you know, she's living in Canada now under a different name. So she needed that money to get out in case Bamber got out, I suppose. I don't know. Alright, Criminal Case Review Commission, 2004 to 2012. In 2004, Bamber's defence team, which included Giovanni Di Stefano, applied unsuccessfully to have the CCRC refer the case back to the Court of Appeal. They've already said no. His lawyers made a fresh submission to the CCRC in 2009. The CCRC provisionally rejected Bamber's 2009 submission in February 2011 in an 89-page document. It invited his lawyers to respond within 3 months, extended the deadline to allow them to study all 406 crime scene 406 crime scene photographs, and in September 2011 granted them an infinite period in which to pursue an additional line of inquiry. Wow. An 89-page document with 406 crime scene photographs, and then they grant them an indefinite period in which to pursue an additional line of inquiry. Like, find something to argue about. That's what they're saying, isn't it? Here you go, knock yourselves out. The CCRC finally rejected the application in April 2012 in a 109-page report, which said the submission had not identified any new evidence or legal argument that would raise the real possibility of the Court of Appeal overturning the conviction. In November 2012, the High Court turned down Bamber's application for a judicial review of that decision. The following year, Giovanni, who was his defence team, was sentenced. Oh my God, he was sentenced in the UK to 14 years in prison for having fraudulently presented himself as a lawyer. As of December 2013, Bamber's defence team was said to be preparing for a fresh submission. And that, guys, is the end of the article. I'm dumbfounded. I'm absolutely dumbfounded. So they turned around and said to them, okay, look, here's 89 pages with 406 crime scene photographs. Knock yourselves out. Get back to us when you want. We've got all the time in the world. And then he's not even a lawyer. So I reckon he was giving it to Bamber or Jeremy. Okay, the case became the subject of a television drama series, White House Farm, starring Freddie Fox as Jeremy Bamber and Cressida Bonas as Sheila Caffell, broadcast in January 2020 on ITV and in the UK and HBO Max in the United States. Wow, so you guys in America have probably even heard of this. I have quite a few American subscribers, so love you guys. But yeah, I watched White House Farm and I was convinced he was arrogant, he was rude. I was just convinced that he'd done it, and to be honest, I still am. I haven't read anything in here that has convinced me otherwise. So I ask my best friend to please challenge me, because I know you think he didn't do it, but having watched part 1 and part 2, how can you not? Because Stan Jones believed he did it, and he pursued him and did everything he could to prove the point that it wasn't Sheila. But moving on from that, you have the court case. You've got the lawyers, 12 people on the jury, 10 of them were convinced he did it, which was the minimum they needed to put him away. So the jury's convinced, and then from, I think, 86 he went to prison, 87 maybe. We're in 2020 and he's still appealing, still getting denied. nothing he does or says is going to convince the CCRC to open that case back up again. And he's been told by the Home Secretary, by the government, you're not getting out. But he still keeps trying, bless. So yeah, if you disagree with me and you think Bamba did not do it, or even if you think he did, pop it in the comments, let me know. And I hope you've enjoyed part 1 and part 2 of this very complex, very heartbreaking, because at the end of it, Neville, June, Sheila and 2, Nicholas and Daniel, all lost their lives that night. So yeah, I'm getting a little bit emotional, I do, but thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed. Please, if you have, give me a thumbs up, comments down below, and please subscribe to my channel, because there is lots more to come, especially in the true crime. I don't know if we can make 2 parts in many of them, but I'm pretty sure we can with the some. So I shall see you in another video, guys. As always, lots of love, lots of hugs, and lots of sparkles to you all. Bye.